So today is Sunday, March 28th, 2021. This is an interview with Mr. Bud Brewer. Bud, will you tell me your full name and date of birth, please?
Yes, my full name is Chester Dickason Brewer. Dickason is important because that was changed due to the Queen of England. This guy my family member stayed with the Queen, and so he changed his name from Dickinson, who signed the Constitution, to Dickason, Dickason. Last name Brewer. I was born in November the 3rd, 1935.
Wonderful. And where were you born?
I was born in Jackson, Tennessee.
Jackson, Tennessee. And it's my understanding that you have some military experience. Will you tell me a little bit about your experience in the military and how many years you worked in the military?
Well, I did a full tour, 3 years in the beginning. I was in missiles, I was in nukes. I could only travel in this country, couldn't go outside the country because I was in nukes. Also in the military, I was a professional shooter, and I won major trophies at the 5th Army matches at Fort Riley, Kansas.
Wonderful.
I took second place in the 45, I took first place in the 22, that's a gold medal.
And what year did you start your military experience?
See, when did I start? It was 1957.
So your tours were for what war?
Actually, I didn't fight in combat.
Mm-hmm.
But after I got out of the military, I was at Sylvania Electronic Products and was moving up quite rapidly through the ranks there. And all of a sudden I got recalled back into the military due to the Cuban crisis. Mm. And I did 9 months, 18 days, 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Who's counting?
Yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
That was terrible. Had to move to Washington, had to move my family. It destroyed a lot. It hurt a great deal. My wife had to fly to Milwaukee with the kids and then come back and stay with me up in Washington. I was a platoon sergeant. I had a platoon of 60 men. Big, that's oversized for a military. And we trained getting ready to go fight the Russians because of their missile thing in Cuba.
Left off was you talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis and your time in Washington.
Yeah, we went to the railhead twice, and what that means is you packed up everything, all your combat gear, everything, and you went and you were waiting with the boxcars and everything, sitting there ready to go to war. And we did it twice. The Russians almost had us in combat, but thank God it didn't happen.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about your UFO experience. It's my understanding that you had an unusual experience.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear about when and what happened.
Okay, it was about 1971 or 2. I worked for a company called Lion Notions. And I was coming from Las Vegas. I got to Barstow on Highway 15. I pulled over for gas. There's a filling station you can get off ramp right there. And I called my wife and let her know where I was and that I would be home in a couple hours from up there. Actually, a little more than that.
Mm-hmm.
That ride that's a long drive. Anyway, so I started out on the highway, and the clouds were like plates. You've seen that before, I'm sure. they looked like they were stacked up over here and stacked up over there. And it was very late in the afternoon. And at that time, there was a fuel shortage in the cities. Out in the country, in the small towns, there was no shortage at all. That's why I stopped to get gas where I did. So I would have gas all the way in and didn't have to wait in long lines to get gas. And so I'm driving, and I have my air conditioner off so that I don't burn up the gas. And I was leaning on the steering wheel like this, with the air blowing across my back, because you sit back against the seat and you sweat when you don't have your air conditioner on. So I'm sitting there, and I was feeling good, and I glanced up in the air. And then I sat back, and then I said to myself, wow, that cloud has a very sharp edge. So I leaned forward again and looked up, and this was a massive straight line thing going right there that clouds just don't have. So I stuck my head out the side window, and I looked up, and I am looking up at the bottom of a massive circular disc. There was two more lines, one line part way down, and in toward the middle there was a bump down in the middle, and that had a line around it too. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I kept looking out, and I'm driving, and I got at the same speed it was going, which was just a little less than 65 miles an hour. And I looked down the highway to see if there was a car close to me, and there was one way. This highway, by the way, is very straight right there. And I looked down, and I could see this other car way, way, way down the highway. I'd never catch up. I looked in my rearview mirror, and here comes a black Mustang that's catching me. So he pulls around to the left of me to go around, and I got up with his speed. I got up with his speed, and I honked my horn. And the guy looked over at me like he's angry. What do you mean? And he looked back. So then I honked my horn again, and he looked over at me, and I said, look up, look up. And so the guy leaned on his steering wheel like this, and he did look up, and he looked back at me, and he stuck his head out the side window just like I did, looking at that thing, and he looked back at me, and I went, and he did, my God, you could see his mouth, mouthing that. And we're driving at the same speed. All of a sudden, this guy locks it up. He pulls over, and he jumped out, and I'm looking in my rearview mirror, jumped out of the car. He either took a picture of it, or he looked at it with binoculars. Then he caught up with me again, and we rode side by side underneath this thing for 5 miles or so. And then all of a sudden he let it off. He let off, and I watched him. I was hoping he'd stay with me, but I stayed with the ship. And I can't explain this at all, what I'm going to tell you now. Suddenly it was dark, and we were driving to Victorville, and I thought, I'm going to pull over, and if the ship goes over the city lights are shining up. It's not a city, it's a town, Victorville. And the lights will shine off the bottom of this thing. And sure enough, I'm watching, and it flies right over the city, and you can see the lights reflect off the bottom of it. And it blew me away. I get in the car, I continue on home. I'm real excited when I get home, jump out to tell Diane what I saw. And she seemed to be a little agitated about something. I said, well, what the heck is wrong? I'm just telling you this story. She said, look what time it is. You're 2 hours late. I said, what? I am not. And I looked at my watch and I was shocked because I lost 2 hours of time and I don't understand it. I will say this, that much later on, I have a big bump on the back of my neck. An MRI was done in California, in a little town that I lived in. Well, it's not little anymore. But the doctor, when they took the MRI, because I was having trouble with it, I had been massaging this thing, and I had never had this big lump on the back of my neck before this thing happened to me. And finally this doctor did an MRI, and then the doctor looked at the picture and he walked out of the room. We're finished, Mr. Brewer, he said. I said, well, wait a minute, what the hell's going on? And he just left. He wouldn't talk to me about it. He wouldn't say anything. So I got hold of the technician. And I said, look, I am a trained, certified first responder. I know you're not supposed to tell me a damn thing, but I said, I want you to tell me what you saw, what it is. He said, hell, I'm going to show you the picture. There's a thing in the back of my neck that's very, very, very tiny. But there are 2 lines that go from that to go to my spine. And they don't know what, the doctor won't even talk to me about it or anything. The technician said, never seen that before in my life. He said, but this doctor has seen a couple of things, evidently, and he's not gonna talk to you about it. So that's my UFO experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's wonderful. And I understand, too, that you had some experiences in Germany, and you do speak German, don't you?
Yeah, I speak Deutsch.
Well, tell me about your experiences in Germany, Ben.
Well, during World War II, when we conquered the Nazi regime, our troops had to stay there as occupation forces to save that country. And I mean, we worked very hard to save it. Germany is, for a European country, is quite large, at least it was, but it got divided up between England, America, and Russia. And Russia got what's called East Germany. So we were occupation, we were the first dependents of the occupational forces to go to Germany. And I was allowed to go and fraternize with you had to be very careful though when you fraternize with the German youth, because they were all sent to what's called the Jugend camps, which is youth camps. And these camps taught them to hate us. However, you'd be surprised, they didn't believe it. I skated with the German kids. I played hockey with them. I had 2 hockey sticks and the puck. They loved it when they saw me coming because they were playing with rocks out on the lake. I lived in a home that was 3 homes above this magnificent, beautiful lake that would freeze this deep with ice during the winter, because I lived right at the foot of the Alps. The mountains came straight out of the ground. You walked out on my balcony and it was, you would pay millions of dollars to live in this home. Millions. Somewhere around 7 bedrooms in that house.
Oh.
It was owned by a Gestapo person. When we went over there, we took the homes and use the homes of those types of people. We did not invade the homes of just your regular people. Now, while I was in Germany, and we moved to southern Germany, Bavaria, that's where the Alps come straight out of the ground, I used to ride horses. Herr Mechlem owned the stables. I went down often to ride because I loved it. I was walking down the hill. I was coming out onto the pastures where they train out there. There was an Arabian stallion that I had seen since birth. Had grown into a horse, pure white with some little speckles of brown on his backside, just some speckles. And this horse never walked anywhere. He pranced. I had to fight him when I was riding with him all the time. Every time I rode him, I got blisters. I had special reins that had notches on it to hang on to. And he always tucked his head down. And he was oversized for an Arabian. He was big. He was magnificent, most magnificent animal I ever rode. As I walked down by the field, Herr Mechlem was out there with the female trainer and his son, who had been a Hitler Jugend. That's the school that they sent them to, and he was nasty. And I was leaning against the fence watching, and I recognized the horse's name was Kismet. Kiss with, in other words. Kismet. And Kismet would square the jump if you didn't let him know you had spurs on. You didn't kick him. All you did is you turn your heels so that he could feel that you've got him. And then he cleaned the jump beautiful. And he squared the jump with this kid on his back, and the kid landed on his neck. And he jumped off the horse, and he had a riding crop, and he began to beat the horse across the chest. I jumped over the fence. I ran out. I grabbed his arm. His dad is standing right there. I didn't care. That horse was so magnificent, I couldn't believe what he was doing. I grabbed it. He couldn't believe that I did. And I stood there with the crop, and I said, come on. And at that time, I was 13. And I had been in Germany for 3 years almost. And he screamed at his father, you can have the horse. I don't want to have anything to do with him. He said a lot of bad words and called everybody their bad words, climbed over the fence and left. I had the reins of the horse. I took the crop and I threw it away. And the horse settled down. But he was going sideways, back and forth. And Herr Mechlem walked up to me and he said, I see you often at my stables. The teacher said that you ride a lot and that you ride very well for someone that's been trained. I said, well, thank you very much. And she walked over and he said, how would you like to learn how to jump and be in competition? And I said, sir, I would love it. I was taken into the fold. They trained me, and I trained for hours and hours and hours. And then he said, you would have to ride for Germany in the Olympics. I said, the Olympics? He said, yes, the Olympics. You are that good. This is later on, of course, that he told me this. He said, but you have to have permission from your parents. Well, my father is a military officer from the United States, and I didn't think they would say yes. And I went to my mother and father. I went to my mother first, talked to her, and she said, let's go see what your dad has to say. So I went to my father, and he said, yes, you can. So I trained for competition for the Olympics. And the day I was supposed to ride, down in Garmisch, Germany, I had a fever of 104, and the doctor would not let me ride. So I went and I watched the competition, and Herr Mechlem took my place, but not on Kismet. He was on Seppel. Seppel was a stallion. You have no idea. I'm going to tell you the truth. The horse color was purple. It had some white on its hindquarters up above. Not much, just a few spots. But that horse, I used to ride a female horse in front of him and swim out in the lake, and he would follow me. I had to make sure that we were far enough apart because he would try to mount the female horses. He was a stallion, and so was Kismet. At the end of the competition, Herr Mechlem won the trophy. He had no faults, believe it or not. He had no faults during this steeplechase or any of the jumping. He came to the stands where I was sitting, and he said, "This belongs to you. You are a better rider than I am. I will put this in our trophy cabinet at the
Stables?
At the stables, thank you. And I will put your name at the bottom of the trophy because it belongs to you. And I'm so sorry that they wouldn't allow you to ride because they're afraid you would fall off the horse and get hurt." So it was a wonderful thing that he did. And he was a German man that was an honest and loving man, and he really appreciated the fact that I took to riding. I used to be able to take the Arabian stallion and walk him sideways down the fence, stand straight away and walk him with his nose against the fence, and I can go the other way. I could do so many things. He learned that I had spurs, but the points on my spurs were covered by a spring-loaded thing that would slide. If I turned them against it, they would slide back, and he could feel the points. But I didn't even have to do that. All I had to do was touch my heels against his side, and he loved it. He never, ever walked. I always had to work him sideways. He walked sideways all the time. If we went out in the trail, I always started at the last horse. I waited, and he would not have it. He would fight me all the way until he got into the lead, every time. He was a magnificent animal. Sorry about the emotion.
That's okay. That's okay. Now, your father was a United States military man, and that's why you were stationed in Germany?
Yes.
Now, tell me what your father and mother's names are.
Yeah, my mother is Mary Olive Cash, was her maiden name. Of course, it became Mary Olive Brewer. My father was Chester D. Brewer, and I was never known as Chester because there was some kind of feud between my mother and his mother over my name. She wanted to call me Chester Jr., and neither of my parents would have it. I don't think my father was crazy about his name, but my father was big man. My father had hands where you can hold a basketball like this, and you couldn't shake it out of his hand. He was huge in so many respects. He was 6'2". I think he was actually 6'1 3/4. But like me, I was 5'9 3/4, and I would say I'm 5'10", or I'm 5'9 1/2". That's what I would say.
And what years were your parents born?
My mother was born in 1908. My dad was born in 07.
Okay. And what were the names of your siblings?
My brother is Frederick David Brewer.
And there was just the two of you?
I'm sorry?
There was just the two of you?
Yes, there was only two of us. He was 3.5 years older than me. So he was a little bit jealous of me when I was born because he had all the attention. And then he would do things like we would go downtown, and my mother would, in those days it would cost a nickel to go to a movie. She'd give us nickels to go to the movies, and then she would say, "You take care of him. Don't you let anything happen to him." One time we were downtown, we just got out of the movies walking back, and they had, in those days in Humboldt, Tennessee, they had a truck that would come down that had arms out on each side, and they would spray water on the sidewalks in the street as they drove down. And the truck was coming behind us, and we ran and got into a storefront. And we're standing in the storefront, and as the truck came down the street, he shoved me out underneath the water. And of course I got drenched, and I have no idea what kind of water that was. But when I got home, he ran out in front of him. Had a lot of things like that happen to me.
Yeah,
many
you did.
times as I was growing up, and Fred would revel in it. "Oh no, Mother, I wouldn't tell you a story. I wouldn't lie to you." Stuff like that.
Did Fred have any children?
Yes, he had 3.
He had 3 children?
Yes.
And how many children do you have?
I have 2.
You have 2 children? And you have, 9 grandchildren?
I have 9 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren.
Wonderful. And if you were to tell them anything about your experiences, they have many stories of you, but if you were to tell them anything, what would you tell them?
Experience different things. Try things that you're not sure of. And when I say experience many things, I'm talking about life experiences. You get trained in a certain way in life, either by schooling or by actual hands-on type work. And there are avenues that lead off of those that should be tried, that should follow. Don't be afraid to do things that you've never done before. that's where you gain experience to complete things that you're not totally familiar with, that enhance your life.
That's wonderful. And now, is there anything else that you'd like to add before I wrap this up?
Well, I do have quite a few more stories. I was going to tell you one other story.
We have plenty of time. Tell me a story.
Okay, hang on for a second. Okay, this experience has to do with part of a bad part of my life. Meaning bad, I mean it happened to me and it was a disaster. All the jobs in the industry that I was in got wiped out in Southern California. And they were wiped out by the Japanese. The only place that there was a vacancy was in Northern California. And so I was traveling back to Southern California on the weekends, and then back. I would come down on Friday nights all the way from Fremont, California, which is in the Bay Area. I'd drive all the way down to Southern California to be with the girls. There's another whole long story to all of that stuff. But to give you an idea, this is the God's truth. I was on Highway 5. I was just leaving the Bakersfield area, and a highway patrolman pulled me over. I had a very unusual car. I had a Matador, American Motors Matador, and it looked like a huge Ferrari. It was yellow and black, a black roof, yellow body, long fenders, beautiful car. This cop pulls me over, and he walks up, and I stick my head out the window and said, I wasn't breaking the speed limit. He said, don't worry, no, I'm not going to give you a ticket or anything like that. He said, I came up, I want to find out, we see this car. This is the only car like this on the road. We see this car every weekend. What the hell kind of work do you do? I laughed and I said, well, I've got a job in Northern California and my children are in Southern California and they still need to have a dad around. So I do my best to get down there every weekend that I can. Guy said, man, can't believe it. He said, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you how to recognize the police cars so that you can speed when they're not out there and when they are. And I'm going to tell you how we do it. And he described the back end of the cars, what they do, how they pull or how they get you to coax you up to where they are, breaking the speed limit because you don't know that they're a cop car. And he went through all that with me, and it was fantastic. But the bad part of it was I lost faith. I went to New Brighton Beach, and I sat in a hole watching the people leave. I was there all day. I had toked a little bit on a joint early on, and I decided not to get real high at all. So I tossed it away. And I suddenly realized there was no one on the beach. I had on that black cowboy hat up there. I walked out to the water. And I decided that I was going to end it all because I'd lost my family and I was living in Northern California. Away from all of them, and so I started out into the water. As you well know, waves are coming in at the beach, and I got up to my armpits, and there was this loud, strong voice that said, "You don't want to do that." And I stopped and I turned around and looked, and there was a man standing on the beach with a black lab at his feet. And they were both looking at me. And I stood there and where the heck did he come from? So I turned around and I started walking back. I got hit in the back by a wave. And that was just before I was shoving off. I was a lifeguard for several years and very good swimmer. And I was going to swim out to a point where I couldn't make it back. But this man, he stood there. I looked at him as I walked by him. And after I had gotten past him, I realized I hadn't thanked him, because I did have a change of heart right away. I turned around to thank him, and he wasn't there. So I looked down the beach this way, and I looked down the beach this way, and there was no one out there. It was just me. And I couldn't believe it. I went back over, sat there and looking at that spot, and I had a feeling come over me that I can't describe. I got in my car and I drove slowly up into the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I knew where my sister-in-law's brother lived. Warren Fisher, a magnificent man. I drove up to his house. I'm still soaking wet. I walked in, he took one look at me and he said, "Give me your keys. You're not going anywhere for a long time." I didn't want to give him my keys, and he wouldn't have it. He was a priest in a religion I cannot remember the name of, but there was tremendous meditation that went on. You had to sit and do lots of meditation. May I continue?
Absolutely.
After several days, after a week or so, he said, "We're going upstairs to a very private area, and we are going to go into deep meditation." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes." He said, "There is dinner tonight. We sit on the floor. There will be approximately 20 people here. I'm going to make you tell your story." Warren had been an officer in the Navy. He commanded a ship in the straits over there that was he's an amazing person. He was. He passed, unfortunately. But I sat down with Warren. We crossed our legs. I'm not going to go through all of the stuff that you go through. And you say, and he said, look into one of my eyes, and you concentrate on that eye. And we did this, and suddenly things began to change in the room. Suddenly his face changed. This is after about 30 to 45 minutes of sitting there doing this. His face got old. He got very old to the point where I couldn't recognize him. He had huge, deep wrinkles in his face. He had
jowls.
Yeah.
Fu Manchu beard.
Yes, he had. He just turned extremely old, and I couldn't believe it. Then all of a sudden, all I saw was his eye. Everything else was black. His eye began to move, and I was watching it move around. And then I saw other things that I can't describe that joined with the eye and moved around. Then he brought me out of it. At dinner, sitting on the floor, when we finished, he's in a special robe, and it kind of glowed a green color. But he did not have the hood over. When he puts the hood over, it comes down and hides his whole face and his whole head. So he's sitting there at the end of this. So somebody knock?
No, it was just the wall.
Oh, okay. He's sitting at the end of this carpet that we sat our food on and ate. There's a young lady opposite me, and there's one that's over here that's just absolutely beautiful. If you wanted to be with a certain lady, or she wanted to be with you for the night, all you have to do is look at each other and smile. That's all you have to do, what you're doing.
You got me there, bud.
Yes. And you can spend the night or the next day or whatever feels comfortable with you. But you come back a free person when you come to this dinner. Actually, I guess there were more than 20 people there. Anyway, you play games afterward and stuff like that. But they talk. Dinner's over. And Warren says, okay, bud, I'd like you to explain to the crowd here what you saw. And so I started explaining. The young lady opposite me said, wait a minute. Surely you did not see the old man. I said, I did see the old man. And Warren interrupted and said, he went far beyond that. He has an amazing mind that captured what some of you will never capture. But he has, this woman said, I have been trying to see the old man for a year. And I haven't seen him yet, and you go one night And you saw the old man? I said, yes, I did. So it's a part of meditation there that I have forgotten a lot about.
You lived there for some time, yeah? In that area?
I lived there for 3 months with them up there before I even, my job and everything. I said the heck with it. But it was killed. Later on, the Japanese got rid of my business in Southern California. The Chinese wiped out my business in Northern California. But it was a totally different kind of business. I was in the electronic. I got back into the electronic business because I had left it when I left Sylvania and gone into the textile industry because that's the only thing that was selling at the time. Yeah, it was this terrible time. But I just thought I would tell that.
So what does the old man mean?
You are into a meditative state where you need to study that particular kind of religion that tells you what you can contact. And they're talking about contacting
Other beings?
Other voices in the universe. Religion. They are a religion, but I'll have to call my sister-in-law and find out. I get the name of their religion because she knows it because that was her brother. Amazing people, beautiful people, and dance. We danced. You have no idea. The music would come on and you would let go and you did the most wonderful things. I wasn't a bad dancer anyway. You can ask Diane. We were actually downtown in Los Angeles at the, oh my goodness, what's the name? Like the Chinese theater. There's a name for it there. But we were at a place that had a band that was there, and we were doing the jitterbug out on the floor. And the guy that was the head of the band actually came out and said, man, you two really can dance. Made my day and hers too, of course.
So that was what, they had to be the 50s or 60s at that time?
No, this was in the 70s.
In the 70s,
Yeah.
okay. So you also lived in the Shasta Mountain area, right?
I lived up in Northern California.
Will you tell me about your experience up there? Because you had a lot of interesting experiences there, too, with meditation and the hippie communes and things like that, right?
Yes, actually, there were some very, very interesting things that happened in Northern California. Gosh, you're going to have to kill that.
All right, bud. What are you most excited for when you get to heaven?
First of all, I hope that I get to heaven. I have sinned a lot in my life, but I have gone before the Lord Jesus Christ and presented my sins to Him, and I'm extremely sorry for those that I have committed, which I will not go into here. I am excited to stand before the Lord Jesus Christ. And to see my family. Once again, I hope that I am able, and I pray that I am able to make that journey, to see them and be with them. None of us know. We think we know, but none of us know what that is going to be like. Whether we have to walk through hell or experience some of it, we don't know that for real. We hear, we read, we surmise. But the real experience is what we are going to experience after death. Hopefully I can stay here a little bit of time and let people know that I'm here before I move on. But I am not going to stay here as some spirits have. I am going to move on and face whatever trials and tribulations that are coming my way after death. I just hope that I make it through that and stand before the Lord my God, Jesus Christ.
And watch over your family.
Also, Myra Melgar was my lady for the past 20 years. And COVID-19 killed her last July. July the 20th, the 21st. But we had a long distance relationship. And when we talked on the phone, her voice was like music to me. And she sent me the most wonderful cards. I sent her many bouquets of flowers that she loved. I even sent her several things of wine and meats and stuff like this, cheeses that she loved. She loved to share a bottle of her wine with one of her friends she would talk to me about. But I was never so shocked when her daughter called me at 5 o'clock in the morning. This time, our time. She was back in North Carolina, so it was like 8 there. And said, Mother just passed away. I'd been trying to get her on the telephone. I couldn't understand why she wouldn't answer. She was deathly ill. COVID killed her. I want to be able to hug her however you could do it as a spirit. I don't know. But Myra Melgar is the person, besides my family, that I miss the most in this world. Amazing lady. Boy, she loved the Lord. Oh my. Can I tell one thing about her? We had a Bible study. I was an elder in the church, which doesn't mean an older person. If somebody doesn't understand what that is, my ranking in the church was directly below the pastor. I was the next person. I always had to have a sermon ready in case the pastor didn't show up. I had to give the sermon. It only happened once. But we were there. Never saw her before. She sat across the room from me. Well, across the room. About as far apart as we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed she had wedding rings on and stuff like that. And what I did not know was that she was breaking up, but she was going through a divorce. But she had heard about us because our church was down the street from where she lived. And in this little town, And we had a very nice, the pastor and his wife were there. And we, after the Bible study was over, they had foods and things like that out in the kitchen, but you had to walk through a dark dining room first. But you could see, I mean, it wasn't real dark because the light was coming from the kitchen and from the living room. And I started to walk through that dining room, and wham! I was hit with an electric shock that went through my body and down to the floor, and I leaped around, ready to attack something that had gotten me on the shoulder. And there she stood, and she had touched my shoulder. And there was some kind of energy that when she said, God said, I must speak to you. Didn't know her from Adam. Just that I had seen her there. We did introduce, of course, all the way around. And I stood there and I said, what did you hit me with? And she said, I didn't. I just touched your shoulder. I said, that touched my shoulder? I said, I can't, my shoulder is numb. I can't feel anything. I said, there's electric shock that I can't believe. I said, I didn't see you there. I'm sorry, what's your name? Myra, she said, I'm Myra. And I have to tell you this word. And I cannot remember the word that she gave me. It was something that my mother said to me out of a coma. This too is going to pass. And the problems that you're having are going to go away. And I said, well, how do you know that I have problems? She said, I got the word while we were in there. I said, wow, let's go in the kitchen where the food is. And my arm was still numb when I got in the kitchen. I could still feel where I had been shocked by her touch. We became very close friends. We went to lunches together with other people and stuff like that. And then she had gotten word from her son was having major trouble in North Carolina. He's a police officer. His wife wanted to divorce. She couldn't stand the pressures anymore of him being a police officer. That's the job that he knew. So she had to go back there. And we parted. We went to dinner together with some other people from the church, and it was a magnificent thing. And from then on, we had a long-term relationship. If she'd stayed in California, I would have asked her to marry me. That's how I fell in love with her. But I still remember that shock. There was a white flash in my eyes that just, I can't describe it. I didn't know that she was going to touch me. I didn't see her standing there. So it was an amazing thing. And she walked with the Lord, that lady did. Myra Melgar. That was my sweetheart for 20 years.
And you're excited to see her again, huh?
Yes, I'm hoping to see her.
Be of able body, and you ride all your horses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be wonderful. Absolutely. But we still need you here on Earth. We're not done with you yet. The Lord still has some plans.
I've got a lot of stories still that are out there, you're right, about things that happen in Northern California that were very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are some dark sides to the things. I was vice president in 2 different companies. I was vice president of sales and marketing at Martech Circuits. I was vice president of sales in California Etching. They were both very large manufacturers of printed circuit boards. And very, very up to date in the industry. I was I was general manager of a company called Acon for 6 years. That was my brother's company. I was supposed to be a full-fledged part owner because I donated my time and efforts. I got all the furniture in the company for practically nothing. Yet my brother was afraid to tell the other partner that I was a partner. Therefore, I wasn't a partner. I was just a person that owned a lot of the stock. That is a dark thing. There's a whole big story there.
Mm-hmm.
But many, many, many things happen there. I worked with, right now, one of my grandsons is that's Aaron.
Mm-hmm. He works for Raytheon?
Works for Raytheon. I was just going to say, I did business with Raytheon. I used to fly down to Southern California often to visit their company because we were selling them component that normally was slid into a mainframe of a big computer that with a drawer about this wide, about this deep, with the components on there, and we shrunk the whole thing down to the size of a pack of cigarettes. That's why, because of that company, that is why there is such sophisticated radar in aircraft now. Because they couldn't put these big things in a plane, and especially in a fighter plane. And we made the thing so that they could, and they had powerful radar after that. We did that.
So you had a lot of jobs from military to technology and sales. You are a pretty well-rounded individual, bud.
Well, I did have a very interesting life in a lot of different fields. You have to work hard when you are learning a business or the business. And that study period is real. It's not something that you just pick up and run with it. It doesn't happen. That's when you stub your toe and have problems. But yeah, but I spent lots of time learning what I was supposed to learn in order to do the jobs. People recognized in me, I was very lucky, and several people recognized in me that I had the ability to do those things, to learn quickly, and to express myself. When I first started out in sales, I could barely talk to a person. And one day I said to myself, no, you have it in you to talk to anyone that's in any industry as long as you learn the basics about the industry. So I did.
Now you
I
can sell
still
snow
remember.
to an Eskimo, huh?
Something like that. Yes. And but people don't realize sometimes that you have quite a bit of knowledge that could be shared. People don't like to be directed in a certain way or told, well, wait a minute, why don't you try this or why don't you try that? They take that as an offense to that sometimes. But yeah, it's been interesting life for me. I get a lot of my ability from my mother. My mother took a test at Walter Reed Hospital because she was hit with a baseball over the side of her head, and it grew a thing into her brain that looked like a golf ball sitting on a tee. The tee is what you put a golf ball on when you drive it,
Yeah.
right? And it's a wooden thing, and that grew into her brain. So they were thinking about operating on it and taking that out. Only thing is, the round ball wasn't just round, it had spines sticking out on it. And they said when they pull it out, it's going to tear up a lot of her brain. It said she may remember that she has children, she may not remember. She may remember that she's married, she may not remember that she's married. You'd have to teach her all of that stuff all over again. And then my mother said, forget my children, forget my husband, to hell with you. I will not take the operation. But she took this test at Walter Reed Hospital. The doctor came out and said, we have never, ever had test scores this high. Your mother, and talking to my father, your wife, is one of the most brilliant women we have ever tested. By the way, her mother was a chemist just like Amber is trying to be, going to be. I could not believe it. My grandmother was one of the first women that ever graduated from college
in the
this country.
1800s, huh?
Yes.
Wow.
And she became a chemist. She was an amazing lady.
It runs in the family.
Huh. Well, I don't know. I stubbed my toes a lot.
Jack of all trades, huh?
Well, sometimes, you know, you think you know something and you don't know it. Especially if you do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But
We got a
Yeah.
lot of experience.
so anyway, that I appreciate you sitting down here and taking the time to talk to this
Absolutely.
old man.
Yeah, well, we
Yes.
know that you've told us these stories for so many years, but we needed to get them down for the next crew that comes through, so they can know all about Crazy Bud Brewer and all the fun things he did. So we love you, Bud, and thank you so much for telling us all your
Thank you
stories.
so much for having me do this. I appreciate it.